my predecessor, Nancy Trim, did an excellent job of sort of modernizing a lot of library services. She started library programs, she started tech education, she did a marketing plan for the library. And so I came into, I guess, what I would describe as a really healthy program, public library program. And the only issues that are limiting that program from really taking off are space and funding. And so my focus in the last year and a half have been to look at the landscape in the community and start to understand how we can address space issues and funding issues for Gunnison County Libraries so that we can continue to grow a great public library program. And so when you're involved with a larger organization like a county or a city, there's annual appropriations that the library is a part of, and so it injects a certain level of politics into public library system. For that reason, the library board felt that there was wisdom, and the commissioners agreed, in establishing an independent library district, sort of like a school district, that operates with the sole purpose of providing the community with public library services.
At that time, it didn't have its own mill levy, so it was not directly levying any taxpayer funds. It was being funded through the county, through an intergovernmental agreement with the county, and those funds are discretionary funds, which means that although the county would like to continue providing them, there's no guarantee they may be able to do so depending on other financial obligations that they have.
In 2011, the library board approached voters to independently fund the library district, and that question did not pass. And that really has led to where we are here in 2019 with major facility issues and a remaining need for dedicated funding for our library district.
Right. Well, my name is William Spicer. I am the Chief Appraiser for the Gunnison County Assessor's Office. So in Colorado, there have been a couple of big constitutional amendments in the course of time that affect property taxes in general. The first one is the Gallagher Amendment from 1982, and the second is the TABOR Amendment, Taxpayer Bill of Rights, from 1992. And they both influence the way that property taxes are calculated and some of the rules around how they get levied. In particular, TABOR instituted a provision whereby whenever a taxing entity wants to either start levying or increase the amount of taxes that it levies, it has to get voter approval in advance for that. And so in any given election cycle, it's quite common to see one or more ballot initiatives for either some local government or the state asking the taxpayers to approve some kind of increase in taxes. And they'll say TABOR right at the top of them. There'll be TABOR provisions, and they'll start with, shall taxes be increased by, and then give you an explanation. And that's to satisfy the TABOR provision of the Constitution. One of the things that the Gallagher Amendment did is that it pegged the total amount of assessed value for the state that comes from residential property versus everything else at 45% of the total. And the way that it achieves that is that every 2 years the state does a study and they refigure what that residential assessment rate needs to be to make the total residential assessed value come out to 45%. And it started out many years ago at 21%. It's gone down over time. It hung around at 7.96% for a really long time. Then in 2017, it dropped to 7.2%, and this year it went down to 7.15%. And what happens is that every time that residential assessment rate drops, the assessed value from residential property becomes less than it would otherwise be. And so it's become a popular thing for taxing entities who are doing these mill levy ballot initiatives to ask the voters, whilst they're asking for the mill levy itself, to also ask them, if the residential assessment rate drops, can we increase our mill levy to compensate for that drop in the assessment rate? And the idea behind that is to try and keep some stability in your funding. This started a few years ago when some fire protection districts were successful in passing mill levy increases to buy new fire trucks, and then the residential assessment rate dropped and all that money kind of vanished overnight, and so they didn't have any money to buy new fire trucks. And the lesson they learned from that was it was perhaps a good idea to add that additional provision to the ballot language, and that's what the language in the library's ballot initiative is going to cover. The other thing that it's going to cover is, in its purest form, TABOR not only requires you get voter approval to increase your mill levy, it also says that if your tax revenues increase over time because property values are going up, you don't get to keep all of that increase. You only get to keep like an inflationary amount of about 2% plus whatever new construction you have in your district. And the idea behind that provision was basically to restrict the growth of government. But again, voters can override that. And the language in the ballot initiative for the library that says, and can the library keep all the revenue that's generated by the 1.9 mils, that is going to allow them to keep all the property tax revenue that 1.9 mils will generate in the future, even if property values go up significantly.
So what we want to do is have the voters approve a funding that's directed towards the library district. At the present time, all of our money comes through the generosity of the county. Even though we're an independent district, we don't have a direct funding from the voters, like, say, the school board or the water board does.
And so the library has decided that for its own financial stability and future consistent funding, that it would ask the taxpayers to support a mill levy specifically for the library district. And so there's an initiative going to be on the ballot in November to levy 1.9 mils to directly support the library. And that's what the ballot initiative is primarily going to ask for: a yes or no vote. Yes, support 1.9 mils, or no, don't support 1.9 mils.
So right now, the library district has no source of sustainable funding. Our libraries could be defunded at any time. This question will, number one, solve that situation to where we do have sustainable funding for library services in Gunnison County.
So I think that taxes are a hotspot in general for folks. All of us have different lifestyles. Some of us have families, some of us don't. Some of us, we're all in different situations. So a lot of times we tend to look at what we want to spend tax dollars on that would directly impact our quality of life. It's tough because I would say that for me as a property owner, I pay a lot of taxes. And also I'm commercial, I pay an abundance of taxes. For me, I understand that taxes are needed, that we have a lot of different things between schools and libraries that we need as a community to thrive. And even though I don't personally have children and I don't really utilize our school systems, I do believe that funds towards that are important. And I do heavily utilize the library. I think it's important. I come from a family of school teachers, and I've always believed that education is one of the most important factors in helping us grow not only as individuals but as a community.
So the actual amount of taxes for any individual property owner are going to depend on, first of all, the value of their property, and second of all, what kind of property it is. For residential property, it's going to mean about $13.60 for every $100,000 of property value. For anything other than residential, which is, agricultural, commercial, natural resource property, because the assessment rate is much higher for those properties, those folks are going to pay about $55 for every $100,000 of property value. And the reason that there's a difference between what residential owners get to pay and what everyone else gets to pay is because there's a different assessment rate for residential property. And that is a result of the Gallagher Amendment, which is the first of the two amendments I spoke about. And since 1986, the residential assessment rate has been dropping over time relative to the fixed rate of 29% for everything else.
The library ballot question in 2019 is not about building a new facility. The library ballot question in 2019 is about sustainable funding for library services. It's about an increase in the programming we're able to provide, an increase in the collections that are available to the public, and making the overall library experience better.
Libraries enhance the value of the community. And from my point of view, both school systems and libraries have to be supported by the local population in and of itself because it's important, but it also increases their own value, property values. They may see it as an extra tax, but over time it enhances the value of the property itself.